welcome to the Goethe Institut Max Mueller Bhavan, and welcome to that conference. I don't have much to say except that I'm delighted to see so many people, and also that I'm really excited about the collaboration with FICA, and I'm looking forward to learn about public art, and I'm interested in listening to the contributions to the panel discussions. I hand over to Vidya because she's the organizer and the mastermind behind it. We are just the host. But thanks again for coming, and I'm looking forward to an interesting day. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonard. Thank you all for being here for this discussion on public art in terms of the kind of ongoing engagement that the artist community has had with it in the Indian context, as well as the kind of organizational context within which public art has been developed. About 2 years back, Samudra Saikia, who was then the Ila Dalmia FICA research grantee, conducted a series of presentations and discussions on performance art titled Anecdotes. And this was part of his, he had got the grant and he was looking at performance art in the Indian context, and he decided to do this ongoing 2-week platform. And it was a very interesting experience where you had a group of 35 to 50 people coming together every day for 2 weeks. I mean, it was something quite unprecedented in terms of all the kind of small programs that we've been doing, the interest and initiative that people were taking, and speaking about various aspects of performance, whether about spectatorship, residue, body, archiving. And there were so many insights, so many questions that came up in this collective platform, and you know, a way of working, not necessarily finding the answer right there and then, but trying to work through certain kinds of questions together, which seemed very productive to us. And we thought this is a model that's worth emulating, to think about programs and research processes together, and to, you know, to turn programs into actually helping and supporting these research processes. So in that light, we invited Nupur, who is the current Ila Dalmia FICA research grantee, and her work is on public art. We invited her to put together this panel. And on the panel, we have a lot of Delhi-based practitioners who she had on her list to interview and document their practice. So via this platform, we're all part of this process. Nupur's project, titled Formulating Dialogic Art, Archiving Public Art in India, engages in documenting and theorizing public art practices in India since the 1990s. And it focuses mainly on urban spaces and metropolitan cities. The project aims to trace the genealogies and histories of art forms of artistic production. And while examining the social turn in contemporary art, this project addresses important theoretical questions to public art in India, which include censorship, spectatorship, aesthetics, artistic process, and critical writing on this topic. So we combined today's proceedings with a day-long session yesterday, which was to review projects that we have been supporting in FICA under the aegis of our FICA Public Art Grant, which we set up in 2007. And yesterday was a very rich day of presentations. It was an internal small forum where we invited some of the jury members and we had the grantees, but it was a really rich day of presentations with 7 of our grantees speaking about the last 8 years and the kind of projects they've done. Like Srijata said, you know, how does one evaluate this kind of intervention in the public domain? And she speaks from her space of working with marginalized communities and her practice is about spending a lot of time with them.
The Azad Maidan
so of course the emphasis is not necessarily on evaluation in any empirical way, but really just understanding, helping us understand the creative practitioner's agency and location in engaging with communities, sites, political and social issues, and how FICA can support these processes further. And what kind of vocabulary do we need to even speak about these
the Machimar colony, which was
and I wanted to just bring in this session briefly because there was such a sense of excitement
Bombay,
at what the grantees had done. And for us also to see all of the projects together was a very awesome experience. And the projects have been very diverse, set in different parts of the country: Guwahati, Shillong, Delhi, Parad Singha village in Maharashtra, Wagad village in Rajasthan. And almost all the projects remain deeply invested in communities, building them, enriching them, sustaining them. They all spoke about the artist's immersion in different contexts of urban slums and resettlement colonies, small towns, rural agrarian societies, craft communities, streets and river banks. And none of them seem to be working with very predetermined ideas on what public art is, but located themselves in collectives and let initiatives and interventions develop from these collaborations. So really working at crossroads of different disciplines, individuals, groups, and at the same time developing the possibility of the creative practitioner's intervention to cause change and shift. It was really about listening and remaining open to what the process was throwing up. And I won't get into each of these projects, and hopefully we will have a space where we can actually share the documentation or find other ways of documenting them. But I just want to acknowledge the work done by each of the grantees: Srijata Roy, the Vala Collective, Samudra Saikya, Indrani Barua, Murugen Rathod, Lochan Upadhyay, Van Frank, and Shweta Bhattad, who's the most recent recipient, and her project is ongoing. And some of the material of these projects are up on our website, and hopefully we can put up more documentation. And I also want to thank the juries who have been part of these projects, because FICA has always returned back to the art community to help us, to help us undertake the jury processes and think about how to, who to give these grants to. And most of the jury members are on the panel today, so it's great to continue the dialogue with looking at some of your work and some of your projects, which have made possible the work that the young practitioners that we saw yesterday are doing. One of the questions that we sometimes ask ourselves is whether by institutionalizing and supporting public art, do we fix it? Do we create artists who are dependent on funding to make these projects? Does it take away from the self-sustained, self-propelling nature of public art interventions that have happened so far? And after seeing the way the grantees have sustained working in the communities before and after FICA's support, proves that this is not the case. We are one moment in a very much longer process.
Within the city,
our modest funding acknowledges the value of the work the artists are doing and have done in the public domain, and I think importantly, not thinking of these as isolated initiatives, but linked and forming relays and conversations. So with that preamble, let me begin today's proceedings by introducing Nupur Desai. Nupur is an old friend and currently a PhD scholar at the School of Media and Cultural Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences in Mumbai. And she has a background in history at Fergusson College, Pune, in 2003, where she did a bachelor's, and art history at the MS University, Baroda. In the past, she has worked as a researcher at Jackfruit Research and Design in Bangalore and Devi Art Foundation, and she worked with us at the Vadera Art Gallery, and recently we were also involved in a research project that she did, an archival research project that she did with the Asia Art Archive, where she was looking at the trajectories of art writing and art criticism in Marathi periodicals. She's also associated with the G5A Foundation for Contemporary Culture, Mumbai, and the Center for Arts and Social Practice, Pune chapter. So Nupur is going to present some of her premise and some of the things that she's interested in her research, and then go on to introduce the speakers and the moderator for the first panel. And I just want to end by thanking Max Mueller Bhavan and the team here, Farah, Kanika, Dr. Emmeling, Dr. Severs, Mohan ji, and Salim ji. And thank you for hosting this event. I think Max Mueller is a very vital part of our art ecosystem, and they have been supporting public art for a long time, and so I think this is a very good venue for us to actually have this discussion, and I look forward to the day. So thank you.
Thank you, Vidya, and thank you all of you for coming here today. First of all, I would like to thank FICA for giving me this opportunity to present my work, a few questions that I have about public art, and also Bhuma and Vidya for pushing me and helping me formulate this and conceptualize this seminar for today. So the title of my presentation is Questions of Public Art. As Vidya mentioned, that this is part of my ongoing research supported by FICA Ila Dalmia research grant, titled Formulating Dialogical Art, Archiving Public Art in India. So what I'm going to do today is pose some questions and concerns which will give us a framework to talk about this divergent concept of public art. And my year-long project aims to document and archive various public art interventions from major cities in India while tracing the history of public art practices. And this is kind of a blueprint that I'm presenting, so it's not a research paper as such. So I'll start. Every act of public art exposes its participants and collaborators to the dynamics of public space, politics of class, caste, language and gender, questions of public and private, spectatorship and gaze, the role of the artist and the participant. Public art is an expanding practice that continues to incorporate various disciplines and mediums. The terminology has altered where new terms such as community-based art, socially engaged art, social practice, participatory art, collaborative art, dialogic art, interventionist art are being employed by artists, researchers, and critiques. Though we may find these initiatives to be scattered and sparse, it is a developing field in the discipline, and hence I feel it is the time to examine public art as contemporary art practice and a significant contributor to the art historical discourse. One can see diverse constituents functioning through various positions while pushing the boundaries of existing discourse on contemporary art that reveal the often invisible ways in which public space is produced and regulated, and some artists reshape these geographies and social cultural contexts through their engagements with various communities and sites. In her critical history, One Place After Another, site-specific art and locational identity, Mivon Cohn argues that community-specific work takes critiques of heavy metal public art as its point of departure to address the site as a social rather than formal or phenomenological framework. These projects create an intersubjective space which becomes the focus and medium of creative inquiry. The public art practices are thus experiments on the relational possibilities of contemporary society. Their rhizomatic bonds are based on adjacencies and distances between entities and therefore cannot be expected to produce definite and absolute meanings, outcomes, or identities. Hence, it is important to understand artistic practices under this paradigm, along with critical and institutional roles within the field of contemporary art. The first step would be to create a conceptual framework to understand the complex matrix in which public art is conceived, produced, and received. Also to see if there are any possibilities of cultural specificity in these art forms in terms of aesthetic choices, thematics, and forms as a result of public encounters. It would also be important to study the development of experimental models for an artistic practice that combine methods for the arts, activism, and other fields in order to cultivate innovative approaches to the construction of social spaces as works of art. It is equally significant to examine how do we look at the cultural politics in the art in public spaces as the role of art has been in relation between political issues in public space and representation. The nuanced relationship between space politics and nationalism, collective identities and histories, as it includes and addresses varied publics. Subsequently, one of the crucial questions that I'm dealing with is how do we theorize and conceptualize public art in the Indian context? Of course, I'm not considering bureaucratic structures and state-sponsored public sculptures or installation as the term is used, but more in terms of new genre public art, as Susan Lacey calls it in her book, Mapping the Terrain, New Genre Public Art. In addition to that, my concern is also to understand how do we devise critical strategies and theoretical and practical approaches to these myriad ways of public art practices in our context. The focus of this research project is to document and archive public art interventions from major cities post-1990s. Hence, the changing context of these cities, transforming landscapes, and spatial politics are important terrains that one needs to engage with. Post-1990s economic and political shifts in India have denatured the forces of art production drastically, while the art market took a center stage amidst a proliferating art scene. But at the same time, it also paved the way for art practices in urban public spaces. The process of urbanization, depending on the mobilization of a surplus product, was a global phenomenon with an intimate connection with urban spaces and financial structures, emerged as a result of economic reforms during this period. The contrasts that are visible through spatial manifestations between the citadels of power and wealth and rapidly collapsing and overstrained urban system are apparent with a shift from industrial to post-industrial structures in the cities like Mumbai or Bengaluru, including issues of depletion of natural resources, exploitation of environment, inadequacy of infrastructure, among others. In addition, its role in the real estate and construction industry has become that of the principal determinant, creating expansions, distortions, and imbalances. Spatially, the agglomeration of the corporates and commercial complexes in the city has produced distinct patterns of urban form depending on the various factors such as firm typology, size, production type, technological limitations, etc. Physical representation of growing economic disparity is peripheralization and the formation of enclaves. The enclaves at exclusive campuses are representative of the divide that exists between global economy and the local one. Apart from urban decay and commercialization, certain pre-existing conditions have been further exacerbated by globalization of economy. For example, the nature of public spaces, the rise of fundamentalism and communalization of political processes post-Babri Masjid demolition. The proliferation of religious identity-based politics, parochialism, and language politics entangled with the issues of urbanization complicated the issues of urban public spaces as sites of public interactions and communitarian dialogues. The social construction of cities in the backdrop of simultaneous processes of liberalization and communalization in these decades led to new forms of artistic production, including public art practices. Therefore, it becomes crucial to understand these sites where public art is formulated and where these artworks or projects are understood as in-between spaces that function as zones of contestation and complex spatial relations. Is it a break away from impositions of the art market that shape the artistic practice? And if it is, then what are the parameters of public art while tracing its antecedents and problematizing the frameworks it functions within? Cities have emerged as pivotal sites where the field of contemporary art practices and cultural politics of urban landscapes intersected in a co-constitutive relationship between linguistic, caste, and religious identities and conflictual nature of social dynamics. It is important to look at the analytical devices to unravel the dialectical relationship between the emergence of public art practices and broader urban transformations. These entanglements with the urban politics are shaped not only by spatial and cultural articulations of global and regional capital, but also by internal struggles for dominance, difference, and resistance among various actors of contemporary cities. These formations of the cities negotiate multiplicity of emergent developments, plural objects and identities, time spaces frothing with the politics of difference, interpersonal associations, and other social experiences. During the 1990s and 2000, economists and business theorists began to argue that growth in contemporary capitalism depended on constant urban creative innovation and the ability to adapt to changing conditions of urban competitiveness. The reiterations about public art have been looked at from the point of view of government-sponsored public monuments, sculptures, installations that would regenerate city spaces, aestheticize them, bringing together cultural creativity and technological innovation. This notion of creative city and the role of creativity in urban economic growth needs to be problematized in current scenario of economic crisis and urban-centric growth models. This creates a kind of rupture where new forms of occupation have tended to privilege people with certain sorts of connections and lifestyles. What is required is to revoke the possibilities encompassed by urban creativity, but to problematize the way it has been revered, shaped, and institutionalized. In this background, one can investigate how public art practitioners occupy an increasingly conspicuous presence in the public domain. They engage with communities, their projects evolve through these dialogues, and eventually shape the art discourse around it. It is also a response to the symbiosis between city and country, which is sought to be destroyed by relocating the city in the new grid of global cities. While talking about the collective participation and community, these artists somehow try to locate themselves in the midst of various kinds of publics who in a way contribute in shaping the notion of artistic practices and public art practices in these circumstances. Though their objectives and outputs vary in terms of form, content, and mediums, these projects carry interlinkages of collective action, shared ideas, and public dialogues. Is it an attempt to fill the gap between art practices and social practices? Did the social turn occur as a result of disintegration of social and political movements and an absence of cultural movement in case of urban as well as rural locations in India? Are artists using social situations to create dematerialized, outside the market, socially and politically engaged art today, and using it as a means to resist and question the transformations that have taken place since 1990s in cities, communities, and society at large? The second step is to understand how does this complex situation in these cities invoke questions of democracy, who the public is, what their roles in the process and of these interventions are, what art language do the artists employ, how curators deal with these circumstances, are there any spaces being created for a mutual dialogue, how are critiques engaging with these modes of practice through their writings, does the community allow these interventions or reject them, what roles do authorities play in terms of permission, censorship, etc. As Mivon Kuhn asserts in her book, the interest in authenticity, memory, meaning, and place emerges as a reaction to the homogenizing force of global capitalism, while questioning the claims of public art practices of overcoming the contradictions of previous models of site specificity. So the contestations are at multiple levels and are layered. These interrogations take a vital shape where the social turn in contemporary art became evident through newly emerging public art practices. I quote Claire Bishop here, an artistic orientation towards the social in the 1990s has been a shared set of desires to overturn traditional relationship between art object, artist, and audience, unquote. These practices and strategies are a way of putting pressure on conventional modes of artistic production and consumption under capitalism. With this transformation into neoliberalism, that is the economic practice of private property rights, free markets, and free trade, the artist becomes the role model for flexible, mobile laborer who can creatively conform to multiple situations and become his or her own brand, as opposed to the collaborative art practice which stands for social unity and democracy. The collaborative or participatory practice is conceived to be the opposite of it and moves towards social inclusion and cooperation. These practices diffuse single authorship, much as they question the dominant market imperatives driven by the consumption of spectacles and repetition. Historical notions of a passive audience viewing artworks are challenged by now emerging collaborative or participatory projects. So the question is, what role does a spectator play in the production of an artwork? By interacting with the audience in participatory projects that intend to build a community or involve different publics in these collaborative efforts, the questions of representation and spectatorship are correlated and conflated in terms of our understanding of these practices. Has the spectatorship transformed into a passive consumer of culture, or can the transculturality of the globalized scenario induce new forms of spectatorship that challenge forms of dominance? An stimulating example of Navjot Altaf's alternative public spaces, where art could be made available to wider audiences with her collaborative projects in non-urban spaces, while coming out of the trap of commodity fetishism, where the binaries of art, craft, urban, rural, artist, artisan were problematized through these engagements. Her projects demonstrated the pragmatics of articulating innovative artistic strategies of resistance through dialogical processes. Relational aesthetics became one of the most distinctive terms in art criticism that was debated and discussed over the years. That was explicitly propagated. The idea was explicitly propagated as a form of constructive opposition to an overcommodified world, a way of recovering moments of communal experience. However, relational art also came under sustained attack for being essentially mystifying, staging pretend moments of togetherness and obscuring the very real divisions that split the world with happy rhetoric of participation. As the art industry became even more global in the 2000s, with ever-expanding series of new biennials and art fairs around the world, relational aesthetics was subsumed under the parameters of art market, where the idea of people as a medium almost became an excuse to generate theme-based events in these global platforms. Thus, can the social practice be seen as something like a radicalization of a recent trend, appropriating from the notion of relational aesthetics, however attempting to give it a more explicitly political edge to escape the latter's incorporation into the art industry? In her seminal work, The 13th Place, Nancy Adjania traces back the notion of socially engaged or politically or participatory art to Odessa Collective, initiated in 1984. One of the important film experiments where funds were resourced during the process and the audience participated in the making of the film. Though it was a short-lived experiment limited to filmmakers like John Abraham from Kerala, it is important to see the efficacy of such projects on our deeper understanding about social engagements as artists. It exemplified the pragmatic grasp of participatory processes and possibilities of co-creating discursive spheres. One can see the continuation of these ideas through various artistic engagements in public art or participatory art today, where participants extend their ideas and skills to the process of art making while critically understanding the collective ways of working together and questioning the existing asymmetries in terms of notions of aesthetics and spectatorship. While the formation of Khoj International in 1997 in Delhi or Open Circle in 1999 in Mumbai, artist collectives repudiated the authorial claims of art practices by a foray of public art interventions in these respective cities. These initiatives are urban phenomena in contemporary metropolitan cities of diversity, continual flux, and increasing unfamiliarity, and a form of collective responses to the situated spatial practice that has metamorphosed the cities in recent times. Hence, understanding the reasons behind the conception and formation of these initiatives, which also became a site for experimentation with non-gallery expression, becomes crucial in this discussion. Khoj artists engaging with people from the surrounding areas of an urban village, or through Vistar in Bangalore, artists like C.F. John brought into play various neighborhoods, fringes of an expanding city, and local histories with their site-specific community projects and interventions. What implications do the term intervention have on the art practice as well as cultural milieu of these cities and their publics? And also, does this in any way critique or challenge institutional practices, fetishization of art objects? What is important for me in this context is to understand the processes which complicate the notion of participatory art while questioning the valorization of such art practices. These public or participatory art practices are believed to be de-alienating people who otherwise lead a fragmented life due to the repressive instrumentality of economic structures. But what happens in the process is that these practices are automatically perceived as creative acts of resistance, even when certain elements are still unresolved and ineffective in the making of these artistic forms. Therefore, it is important to question the intersubjectivity of art projects dealing with collectivity and participatory forms and challenge the idealization and realization of community in participatory art. Tracing a Disappearance was an intervention performance conceived by Prajakta Potnis as part of the Fluid City project in Mumbai, where she had planned to retrace original boundaries of a lake in Thane near Mumbai. The performance was about drawing a thick line with chalk powder on the surface of the earth, which, though seemed like a simple harmless act, eventually turned out to be a very volatile one. People feared that her action would displace them from their semi-legal housing, which is now encroaching upon the shrinking lake. The performance was stopped after the local political goons threatened the artists and organizers to break their equipment. This whole incident raised a lot of issues about the notion of art language and its communicability, the ambivalent ground that we have to deal with when we enter a public space, questions about representation, identities, and also issues of development in the context of a metropolis. As Grant Kester argues in his conversational pieces, dialogic art necessitates a shift in our understanding of what art is away from the visual and sensory and toward discursive exchange and negotiation. He challenges us to treat communication as an aesthetic form and puts forth a proposition that measures the success of collaborative art projects in terms of its level of social intervention. This eventually poses a question about the aesthetics of these projects and art practices, as it may ignore the elements of work's aesthetic impact. In his project in Kochi, Tushar Joag worked with a cooperative of washermen as part of exhibition Critical Juncture, where the Vanar Sangam occupied the exhibition space allocated to Tushar, which played an important role in eventually raising funds to install an industrial machine at Dubbi Khana. Another example is a project Malleshwaram Calling, conceived by Archana Prasad of Jaga, where she mapped and documented memories, narratives, and personal stories, myths about the neighborhood of Malleshwaram in Bangalore from its residents. The telephone booth set up under the flyover mediated these voices through an old telephone where passers-by could enter and listen to these stories and memories. The project involved the permanent residents as well as one-time visitors while invoking a sense of community while revisiting the past under the present-day alien-looking flyovers. These examples for me are to ponder upon certain questions regarding these practices which have an emphasis on process over a definitive image or object. Even though form and visuality remains a significant vehicle for communicating meaning, collective methods are privileged over a discussion of the work's conceptual significance as a social and aesthetic form. What are the parameters to understand this shift towards non-object-based practices from object-based practice? How do we perceive these objects that are made through a participatory process? For example, in case of Shilpa Gupta's 100 hand-drawn maps, or how do objects in There Is No Explosive in This, again by Shilpa Gupta, traverse the public-private binary while acquiring different forms? Is it the case why a paradox is created where collectives and artists are appreciated for giving up the authorial voices and to some degree are accepted from art criticism, or is it because we still are in the process of building critical framework for these art practices? How are these artworks and projects appreciated, looked upon and critiqued in terms of art project as a social bond and sacrifice of authorship in this nature of true and respectful collaboration? Are we subsuming both within the ethical or social? Finally, defining the space between the artist and audience as a shared field of intersecting subjectivities that generates experiences and feelings, I wish to ponder upon what does this shared field entail. For the artist, intersubjective relations weren't an end in itself, but rather served to unfold a more complex knot of concerns about visibility, engagement, and the conventions of social interaction. Though Grant Kester articulates social participation in contemporary art as radical practice, he also criticizes the privileged position of the artist who may patronize the viewers, participants in the process of art production or exhibition. In addition, he is critical about the role of art in revealing social conditions rather than changing them, which may help continue or reinforce the present social hierarchy and division. The issue of difference is key to my understanding of identity formation in communities, which is supported by the temporal and spatial demarcation of communities as social formations. As against Claire Bishop, who points out that this attitude may present participants always at receiving end and dumb and fragile creatures who are constantly being exploited. She scrutinizes the emancipatory or radical claims made by scholars like Kester about the role of participatory art. In creating community out of discrete and marginalized social groups, does public art in any way reduce the community to one-dimensional, stereotypical descriptions rather than exposing the complexities of their formation and social positioning? Does this agenda of social inclusion lead to reduced role of the state and more importance to self-administration and adaptation? And lastly, does the discursive characterization of public art practices lead to the commodification and the promotion of these practices by bringing them into the fold of contemporary art? Do we homogenize the complex activity of such practices? Rather than simply looking participatory practices as ameliorative practices, how do we question the ameliorative assumptions that create the basis for these dialogues? Thank you. Okay, thank you. So we'll start with our first panel. While I started working on the project, I decided to interview and focus on certain cities, metropolitan cities mainly from India, and I wanted to meet and interview and document certain projects. So Bhuma suggested that why don't we do a seminar, and so I wanted to invite artists who have been engaging with public art practices, also engaging with the city for a very long time, and who have developed their art practice through engagements with the city and certain communities. So that was the idea behind putting together this seminar for today. And So we have two panels. The first one is Politics of Space and the City, where we have 4 speakers, Inder Salim, Vivan Sundaram, Tushar Joag and Vasudha Thozhur, which will be moderated by Ravi Sundaram. And in the afternoon, we have second session, which is called Unframing Public Art, where we have Pooja Sood, Ravi Agarwal, Sharmila Samant and Astha Chauhan, who would be sharing their projects with us. So I would like to invite Ravi Sundaram to moderate the session and introduce the speakers of the first panel. Ravi Sundaram is a professor at the, as you all know, CSDS. In 2000, he founded the well-known Sarai program along with Ravi Vasudevan and Rux Media Collective. His work rests at the intersection of the post-colonial city and contemporary media experiences. Sundaram has looked at the phenomenon that he calls pirate modernity, an illicit form of urbanism that draws from media and technological infrastructures of the post-colonial city. He has co-edited the critical acclaimed Sarai Readers series. And Sundaram's essays have been translated into various languages in India, Asia and Europe. His current research deals with urban fear after media modernity, where he looks at the worlds of image circulation after the mobile phone, ideas of transparency and secrecy, and the media event. So, Ravi Sundaram.
I just wanted to respond to some of the issues you raised, Nupur, just to frame the discussion a little bit. I think one of the key issues historically in urbanism has been the issue of value. How is value produced in a city? And culture has been a strong component of value. And for 100 years, architecture and design had a kind of monopoly on it. And in the last 10 years, we have seen the coming together of value, design, and something designated as public forms of art. And value through art was very central in the big boom that really ended around 2008, where the big speculative boom, where all new forms of value, new art institutions coming up. I think the interesting thing that Nupur brought up, which I want to touch on, because India is a very interesting case, because we never really went along with the big boom as was in East Asia and Europe, and we produced interesting interspaces, edges and institutions and different sites. So we were neither here nor there, right? But the interesting thing is that of participation. And I want to bring back participation, because one of the most interesting things that I've been seeing is participation has come back as a code for the political now, particularly with the coming of phones and this notion of permanent publicity in any art event that comes up. And this we are seeing in different parts of the world. And let's try and think about it. We have 4 very interesting presenters who have worked in this form, and I think the new challenges are going to come up in the next 4 or 5 years in India, because we've entered a very difficult time in our political and cultural history. So I want to open with Vivan, if that's okay, Vivan. So. So Vivan, a short introduction. All of us know of Vivan. Vivan was born in 1943 in Simla. He studied painting at MS University, Baroda, at the Slade School of Fine Art, London, in the 1960s. Since 1990, he has turned to making artworks, many of which we have seen. He has exhibited in the Biennales of Kochi, Sydney, Seville, Taipei, Sharjah, Shanghai, Havana, Johannesburg, where we were together, Gwangju. His work has been in pretty much all the major institutions in the world: Tate Modern, London International Centre of Photography, Queen's Museum, Mori Art Museum, Haus der Kunst in Munich, Chicago Cultural Centre. It's a long list. And I think what is interesting about Vivan, as in terms of this panel, is that he has really provoked through his artwork, many questions about thinking about this edge space that I mentioned in in the city, particularly this notion of how urban form recirculates through garbage, through urban peripheries. He's opened up many questions. So Vivan, I would ask you to come and make your presence. So we stick to 20 minutes each. Yeah, because we are running late and we want brevity and and discussion. Please. Yes.
Yeah, I'll be moving fast. Thank you for the invitation, and I won't go through the rest of it. Well, as Ravi said, it's been a long career. In fact, 50 years, and literally to date, on the 6th of April, 1966, in Dhumimal Gallery, my first show closed, which was opened by Swaminathan. So that's a long innings, and I have engaged with various aspects which have been dealt with in my artistic persona. So I've been, Nupur has been very kind to me and selected 2 aspects to deal with, so I don't have to ramble through whatever 15, 20 projects. And she first said I should speak a little bit about my relationship to Sehmat and what works I have proposed there. And the second, already indicated by Ravi, my series called Trash. But I have included 1 or 2 other things which I think will be relevant. May 68, for many of you might know or not know, was a seminal moment in world politics, a student revolution, and it completely transformed me as a student in the Slade School of Art, where literally I was pulled out of my cubicle to oppose racism, and then subsequently I found myself on the streets almost on every other day. And this relationship of May 68, which started in Paris and in one sense critiqued the society of spectacle, but the other very important aspect of that period was the very dynamic, powerful student movement against American imperialism and its assault on Vietnam. And so I found myself not only on the streets, but the barricades in front of the American Embassy in 10 Downing Street. And I was arrested and put in jail for 10 days, but that's a romantic story, which I'll tell you later on. But I juxtaposed this with a painting I titled May 68, and I was influenced greatly by one of the most complex and intellectual pop artists called R.B. Kitai. And as you can see, there's a strong sense of abstraction and formalism, which through the few presentations of my work about urbanization or about the city constantly return this aspect of formalism. I'll briefly now run through the few projects. I won't go into, because Sehmat also has crossed 27 years of its existence, and it has been in the forefront of involving artists in relationship to the violent politics of the Hindutva right wing as a kind of frontal assertion, and it has involved artists in multiple different levels. This is one of the first projects done in a resettlement colony, in fact created by the infamous Sanjay Gandhi, but in fact it was exceptionally well designed compared to how the new colonies are people are placed in. And this was ran over a long period of time and brought in all different artists, theatre people, photographers to set up workshops. The next was, and of course the word communalism is almost central to the position that Sehmat takes in its organizing people in all disciplines to come on a platform, and never before have classical musicians and dancers appeared on a stage with radical theatre people like Habib Tanveer or Anand Patwardhan. So this relationship I proposed kind of participatory contribution, as you can see, from writers, photographers, poets, and this format 9 by 9 canvas, which then had this mobile quality to it. There is a catalogue which will be outside, and in fact Safdar Hashmi's mother, extraordinary lady, woman, sorry I should say, as it says, it traveled to 30 cities and in Delhi was shown in 40 schools, and through the sale of paintings we were able to buy a truck. So this is possibly the most exhibited artwork ever done in India and seen by the maximum number of people. So this whole structure would be taken on the bus and travel tens and thousands of miles. The next project was, in fact, Sehmat has the word nationalism comes up, and apart from its Marxist position, it has deeply respected certain aspects of Indian nationalism, not defined by the right. And so again, the relationship to Gandhi. Gandhi, as you know, wrote postcards, and you could just write M.K. Gandhi and it would reach to him, not even India. So the idea was to use this form and ask artists, and we had, as you can see, a huge number that came there, and the 6 cards that each artist made, different ones, were simultaneously shown in 6 cities all over India with original works, and then these were then made as a box of cards. And incidentally, Sehmat is reproducing these 100 cards again, and it will be available for you to buy them. And there are some very remarkable works. People like Akbar Padamsi said he first did his Gandhi series that, and people like Atul Dodia. So it made a huge impact. The next was, again, as I said, celebrating independence. I proposed a gift for India, and again this was possibly the largest, in quote, international show ever done in India. As you can see, 200 artists from 27 countries, and it was a cube 6 by inches, and so Sehmat would have this postman coming with these dabbas, and every time with great pleasure we would open them. And as you can see, there were those that know the art scene, an artist like Mary Kelly gave work, Alfredo Jar, Rashida Ryan, and of course there were Indians. And then we displayed Ravindra Bhavan. We kind of found a form to display this. It was shown here as well as in Bombay, and then they were auctioned. So every time the relationship between a theme and a form was very important for me to think through as now artist activist and / artist curator. The next was to deal and engage with the city. And in this case, we announced this, and as you can see, we got 60 proposals and then had a selection of them. And that basically, the other aspect was the collective studio, where the format that we've proposed to them was that either on a hand push cart, like you see Jangi Jani one, or a cycle rickshaw you could choose. And all these were then brought to my studio in Ayanagar, and all the artists came and made them. So for about 3 weeks, there was a tremendous creative energy with the cycle walas fixing them how you wanted them, and the way the artists were making these forms. We were able to, unfortunately, not allowed to take them through the streets of Delhi because cycle rickshaws cannot ply down main streets. So the police chief said, if you motorize them, then you will be allowed. Sorry, should have put this off. Pardon, sorry. So we took them to different localities, and one of the nicest, this is here in VP Bhavan, and in Jamia we could take them through the streets. Now I come to my own work, and there was, how artists deal not only with the city, but also the relationship of collaboration and disinvesting the authorial in some manner of speaking. I've attempted that at many moments and not always successful. But as you can see, many of these names are well known. Architect Romy Khosla and the Raqs Media Collective. Next, Ram Rahman, selection of his photographs. Shantanu Lode, who very tragically is in a state of coma after an accident. And the final is the work with the Bharti Chaturvedi. And here also, the title of this ambiguous room with bed. Now you hardly see a bed, but I was interested in this open space which then allows the spectator, the other, and what we define as a moment of rest, but rest also is simultaneously a kind of workbench or a workplace. And this open relationship of the room to the city, and in fact to name this city as New Delhi, because being brought up in Lutyens, Delhi, I felt that there's such an enormous transformation which I don't fully understand, or let's then, that I should then think of it as a new Delhi, and now the word has been used. In fact, it has become possibly the city of the 21st century, bypassing Bombay, which people don't like to hear, but I'm sure Ravi has more to say on that. The reference to the trash work, which Nupur asked me to speak about, here I was, as you could see in the last work on the extreme left, these were waste pickers which Bharti Chaturvedi, this very dynamic woman, had organized a kind of informal union of waste pickers, and there was something like 60,000-70,000 waste pickers on a list, and she got them cards so they wouldn't be arrested. And I would attend the meetings, and from being there and connecting to them, I started thinking of a city outside Lutyens, a city outside the gated cities which were emerging, and a city which is being transformed almost on a daily basis. Because as you were transformed, they are being destroyed, they are being bulldozed, because as you know that they are illegal slums. And you hear of thousands of suicides in the countryside, but when communities, whole jhuggi jhopadis are destroyed, you very rarely hear of suicides in the urban. So there is this whole very engaged, not at all organized by any political party, that hundreds of homes are destroyed. I walked around with Ravi Agarwal around the Yamuna, and you just see kind of what you see at the front of this, bricks, and then the remnants of what would have been the size of this 12 by 12 room, etc. And so then I, in my studio, imagined out of the garbage that I was connected to with these people who were collecting them, to create a kind of what I call a palette of all this. And I then got them, ordered them, and then got two young artists, Pravat and Manmeet, they're not here. And I asked Bharti to suggest any of the waste pickers who'd come, and one of them did come, and he became in fact a performer for me. And this relationship of the fragile city, the city that's constantly collapsing. This also project about construction and a photographic work, and there were 3 points of view. The perspectival view, I'm not showing you the top angle or master plan, or what you call the master plan, the top angle, and then the third, the digital. But this fragile city was then, of course, in the studio, all site-specific installations, and this was site-specific in a manner of speaking. I'll keep speaking over this, so it's only lasts 1.5-2 minutes. Are fragile, and also they have to be destroyed. So this relationship of the destruction of the artwork, I think has a connection with public art, because the public art is there as performance, it's presented, and it then has to be destroyed. So this short little excerpt from this video, and the text, this is at the very end of that installation, and this is about its poetic collapse. So in a sense, an installation that's site-specific does require a documentation and a translation into another medium. And that becomes very essential, because archiving in a creative way becomes the core of the practice of installation art, and in fact of public art as well. I think that's very crucial, because without the archive, then there is no life after that. And the quotations that I came across very unexpectedly for me, but maybe some influence of Sufism that Samad brought, that these are quotations of Jalaluddin Rumi. Here, this is called the Brief Ascension of Marian Hussain, and Marian Hussain was one of the waste pickers who came, and he was so creative and exceptional, and I asked him to perform, and you'd be surprised about this name. He said, my mother worked in the American embassy, and when she said his name was Mashad, she said that's too difficult, I'll call him Marian, and the name stuck, and there's a sort of charm about the name. And as Edith Rogoff, if I can quote, said, all ascensions are brief. So this is a brief video. This is the public art project, which also Nupur asked me to refer to, the one that Pooja Sood did, the 48 degrees one. And I was originally to do it in the Central Park in Connaught Place, in the water body. But suddenly the police said, you can't bring anything, even if they are empty water bottles, and these are Himalayan water bottles. So I was sent to the dry place of beautiful Roshnara garden, where there used to be, as you can see, a beautiful pond here, but there was nothing left. And anyway, it created another sort of poetics, the dry grass. And for some reason, I wanted to have with this what I call flotage. It's also about 50 feet long and 20 feet wide, and there are about, I think, 10,000 Himalayan water bottles. And after it was over, I went to the river, and my friend Atul is here, who's a kind of master caretaker of the Yamuna River and a guide, and he said, this is the spot, Vivan, where you can launch your boat. It's about a 10-12 minute video, but I start with again this reference to my interest in minimalism and abstraction as part of a statement, because we always tend to think that even the transformation of garbage in my work, I remember Pooja Sood said, but you made your photographs so beautiful, but garbage isn't beautiful. But that's precisely the job of artists, to transform their material to another level and an aspect of beauty, of the aesthetics of beauty. But as you will see, how the previous one ended and this also will end, is that there is in public art, in installation art, the destruction of the object. And so this exquisite object where four people are able to sit on and move it across the river, it's about almost 45 minutes they move. And these are the same waste pickers who, through Chintan, that's the organization that Bharti runs, came here to destroy this object and then take it back. There's in fact a little factory they have, and by the way, they break it into tiny little chips, and the plastic of these water bottles are hugely in demand, because I think Reliance and only one other company transforms them into yarn, into various kinds of cotton. I'll end there. Thank you.
I'd like to introduce Tushar Joag, and I just give this incredible, it's an incredible biography. He completed his bachelor's from Fine Arts from JJ, a master's from Baroda. He spent 2 years at the Rijks Academy in Amsterdam, co-founded the artists Open Circle. He's been curated the co-curated the Havana Biennale, World Social Forum, Globalization at Hunger, Porto Alegre. And right now, one of the most interesting things in the current context is the Right to Dissent, which is an exhibition of contemporary art, film screenings, and panel discussions in collaboration with Clark House, Mohila Parekh Center, and the Committee for the Release of Dr. Binayak Sen. So that in the current context that I refer to, it takes on a greater charge. Currently core faculty and associate professor at Shiv Nara University, Department of Art Design and Performing Art. Yeah, we'll have Tushar.
Okay, so this is just a very quick run through just 2-3 works which actually made me start working in the public domain as such. This is, I'm sure everybody is quite familiar, so I'm not going to linger much on the works. I'm just going to keep them there as pointers. This was a work that I did with Kaushik Mukhopadhyay, which was a collaborative project. This was put up in the basement of the YB Zahan Center, and it was, what I created was a big labyrinth through which people could walk and actually wear the various props and things that were made by me. Then when I was at the Rijks, I made a lot of interactive works, but they were not exactly public works. These are just actually reminders for me of what I need to talk. So they were works that were interactive, not necessarily public. After that, I came back from the Rijks and I was rather confused, and I didn't know exactly how to proceed with my practice. And in fact, I did not want to practice, which I know I've spoken about earlier also. And then Geeta pointed me to Madhushri Datta in Bombay, who ran Majlis, and Majlis had been working with they have like a legal cell, so they had been kind of interfacing with art in a more in a way that I thought it would satisfy me in a way at that point. So they in turn pointed me to, of course one knew of Safdar Hashmi because of Sehmat, and one had been participating in all the projects of Sehmat, and they pointed me also to Badal Sarkar. And so I'm just talking about these because these were the kind of inputs that kind of went into pushing me towards making work that was in the public domain. Also at that point, I was involved with a lot of NGOs and a lot of other activist organizations, through which I was standing at many corners and distributing leaflets and pamphlets all the while. So, or attending morchas, making props for morchas and stuff. And then through Open Circle also, we kept on doing that because, through Open Circle, we've done like tons and tons of activities in the public space, which I'm not going into go into now. But through that, we did a lot of pasting of stickers in local trains, on cars and parking lots, lots of leafleting, pamphleting again. So, it was all these things that I was involved in at that point. Then through Open Circle, we did this action in support of NBA, where we there was a meeting happening between Medha Patkar and Chief Minister. And right outside of the Mantralaya, we went and we kind of demarcated these what would you say, these squares, which were like supposed to be and we pasted pamphlets on them, which actually carried names of oustees from the Narmada Valley, and it was like a gesture of kind of allotting land to them because the government was not capable of doing it. So it was so this was one action, after which in 2002 I did this. So these were like just me trying to limp back to making art in a way. And this was an action which I did in London, where I tied these kind of tags all over the city of London, and I exchanged my place in the gallery. I offered that space to Oxfam, who came and put up their kind of props and literature in my space in the gallery, and I took the space in the city. And I was tying leaflets, pamphlets, not leaflets, sorry, these kind of tags all over the city, which were talking about the unfair trade practices. And the World Trade Organization meet had just concluded actually. And then I had set up an ID on email where people could write to me. And as you can see, it read, "Can you eat his cake and eat our bread too?" And then these things, these tags with silk tassels were also put in the Oxfam bookstores, Oxfam stores, and they were sold as bookmarks, and all the proceeds went to Oxfam. Then this was something that I did during one of the Open Circle events called Reclaim Our Freedom, which was a soapbox theatre. So at Churchgate Station, I did this performance kind of a thing where I auctioned my belongings and my it was kind of auctioning my past. In fact, it was trying to talk about how you can't get rid of your past even if you want to, in a sense. It was like it was actually alluding to what the right wing was doing, BJP was doing at that time, trying to change history. So it was act kind of trying to get rid of my history and how impossible it is. Okay, now the points that Nupur wants me to talk about: gentrification and development. This was a project that I did where I distributed these demolition letters to middle and upper middle class localities, and people really thought that their buildings were going to be demolished to make way for these canals that were going to connect the city. The next project is the Bombay Dowry. I actually staged like a marriage procession. I asked all our friends from the art community to come dressed for a wedding. So it was as if I was dressed in a hard hat and my unicel overalls. So it was basically to talk about how land is being grabbed from the people of the city and given away to builders. Of course, it was trying to look at what the British had done, or rather the Portuguese had done. You know the history. They had given away Bombay as dowry to the Portuguese. To the British, sorry. This was again an itinerant human fountain. Then this was it was usurping of the space by the parochial forces, not the builders now, but the parochial forces. So I had done this project called Looking for Flora, where I replicated the plinth of the Flora fountain in exact scale, working with people who make sets for Bollywood, and it was a team of about 16 people who took it through the city in one night and installed it at various spots. Okay, about authorship, representation and intersubjectivity, I'd like to talk about the project Are You Awake, where I had set up like a makeshift telephone exchange, and I was connecting people who had been contacted by me earlier and who had prepared a kind of a 3-minute, 3 minutes of either speech or song or poem or whatever, and I kept connecting one person to the other in a ripple, starting from the south of Bombay till the north of Bombay. and all the conversations were then recorded and people could hear them. Washing dirty linen was done at Kochi, where the Vanar Sangam people hung their clothes in the gallery space again. And through crowdfunding, we raised money and we were able to get a 40 kilo industrial washing machine and a hydro extractor for them. And they are now, in fact, actually, they are now going to access funds because they got charged up by this whole idea. And now there is a fund for ventures by scheduled caste or something like that. Some kind of funds are earmarked for something like that. So they are going to access those funds and they're going to get more of these machines now. They're working on that. This was a project that I did in Bombay. What I did was I worked with 2 NGOs and we worked with kids and young adults, and they made scrapbooks. And from the scrapbooks we decided to take out a few pages and kind of frame them, and the others remained in the scrapbook. And Unicel made some interventions trying to annotate what they had done with other stuff. And then all these objects, the scrapbooks, they had a number scribbled behind them, and we actually went and lost these books and frames and some other objects that were made by these people on the local trains of Bombay. We actually made teams and we just went and left them in the trains of Bombay, and people, of course, then picked them up, must have browsed through them or whatever, and then they called back on that number, and out of about 35 or so, about 20 of these objects were returned by the people who found them. And then again, whatever was found was then laid out on the platforms for people to again engage with them. This was a project I did here at Nizamuddin. This was actually facilitated by the Aga Khan Foundation. They have 2 initiatives, 3 actually. One is Noor and one is Insha. So these are ladies' initiatives. The Noor initiative, actually, the women, it's a self-help group. They make objects with sanji cutting, like lampshades and diaries and books and stuff like that. And Insha does kind of stuff with stitching and lacework and embroidery and stuff like that. And Sair Nizamuddin is an organization of the youth in the Nizamuddin Basti who take people on heritage walks. So I kind of collaborated with them, and we, with their help and in fact with their ideas, we decided to map certain facets of the Basti. I mean, they decided what they wanted to map. So there was food, there was culture, there was sport, there was education institutions. So we made like various layers of this. The ladies from the Noor initiative cut out all these various maps. Then Mr. Anis Siddiqui, who is an Urdu calligrapher, he put on the key of each of the maps in Urdu, and then they were all then assembled like this, one over the other. It's about 4 feet by 4 feet. And then it's displayed in the Aga Khan Foundation, and a lot of people keep visiting there. And these people, in fact, keep bringing people to see what they have done to the office. It was also then displayed in the market. They have a big Monday market, so it was displayed during the Monday market. Where you can see that black column there with those 3 white papers is where the stuff, the work was kept. Okay, apart from these, I mean, these are kind of projects that I do, that I have been doing, and which I talk about in art circles. But then there are some other projects that I have been doing which I don't usually talk about. But I'm just going to quickly show you a few images. I was involved with this basti around the airport, which was going to be demolished. So I would make these like I kind of made like the ant as the symbol for their struggle, and I made these 4 drawings, which then went on a lantern, and they were put on the houses of the basti. The whole thing is that the basti was kind of polarized. There were people who were taking the rehabilitation package, there were people who were not taking. So this was like kind of a marker. Those who were standing firm on the grounds and not accepting the rehabilitation package would display this lantern. So then people would know what their strengths are. And also the touts were trying to, arm twist people or convince people into taking the rehabilitation package would know that these people are absolute supporters. I also made a lot of leaflets, pamphlets, taking the ant as the symbol for their to represent them actually. So they were like little graphic novel kind of posters which kind of kept talking about the stories. Then I have been visiting the Narmada Valley. I used to go there every year, and every year I used to go there during the Bal Mela, and I would keep doing workshops with kids. These are all the various workshops that I've done with them. I don't even have images of a lot of workshops and stuff that I've done there. These are a few that I had on my phone or whatever. Anyway, that's it.
We now have Vasudha Thozhur. So a brief introduction. She was born in Mysore in 1956, studied in the College of Arts and Crafts in Madras and a School of Art and Design in Croydon. She lived and practiced in Madras at the Cholamandal Artists Village, the Regional Lalit Kala Academy Center, and her studio between 1981 to 1995, and in Baroda between 1996 and 2013. In 1996, she worked at the Gasworks studio in London and the Charles Wallace Grant and the Cité des Arts in Paris on a French government fellowship. So she's got a range of practices which are really spread out all over India and rest of the world. But right now she's associate professor at the School of Art, Design and Performing Arts, Shiv Nara University. So we look forward to hearing from Vasudha.
I would like to begin with a brief preamble which addresses some of the questions that Nupur sent me, and I will also show a project that she wanted me to present. I'll begin right away since we are a little short of time. Our university is situated in an area earlier known as the Doab, between the Ganga and the Yamuna rivers. Apart from being fertile agricultural land, it is associated with several mythic and factual histories of turbulence and change. A significant part of it lies along the Grand Trunk Road, which plays a major role in the dynamic nature of its communities and its spaces. Much of the land and the fields around us, however, have been leveled and cleared to make way for malls, golf courses, multi-storied residential complexes, and so on. We are therefore in a position to actually witness the rapid erasure of villages, small towns, and settlements to make way for the dream of a new India. In official terms, it is now, within quotes, an industrial area located at the intersection of the western and eastern dedicated freight corridors, which is also the gateway to the Delhi-Bombay Industrial Corridor, within brackets DMIC. It lies within the NCR of New Delhi and is adjacent to Noida, one of the largest industrial townships in Asia. Those of us who have recently moved into this area are initially disoriented, as there are no markers of memory or history, no visible temporal dimension. What is apparent, on the other hand, is the regulation of life by a system that is close to militaristic, armed security men who tell you what is allowed or forbidden, barricades, fences, walls, where earlier there was free passage. The colonizer is now embedded deep within our own aspirations. The danger of seeing the enemy as an external agency of Western origin is that it stifles self-examination. Business interests, industry, the state, in its cessation of responsibility to private corporations, have taken over the role undetected because they seem to represent us. The immunity granted by laws, created and legitimized by earlier imperialist powers, are still written in stone and complete the transformation. We see this phenomenon unfold before our eyes. Rural, pastoral, and other cultures, each with their distinct lifestyle and dialect, moving towards the teeth of the new horizon. The familiar pattern begins with coercive acquisition of ancestral land and loss of the cultural underpinning which enables people to retain their sanity in the face of change. The eventual depletion of compensation money, the resort to firearms and violence on the pretext of communal, ethnic, and other issues are therefore inevitable. Local dons, in collusion with the state and other colonizing agencies, then begin to wield power for their own personal gain. The religious imagination begins to assume monstrous proportions as a reaction to the conflict between an inherent incapacity for rapid change and a greed for short-term gain, along with a global lifestyle which is ruthlessly promoted and advertised by the media through monumental hoardings and events carefully constructed to resemble one's wildest dreams. Its value as propaganda is phenomenal in terms of the mass conversion that it effects, and it is ironic that the power of the image is established through these problematic affirmations. One begins to have a fair idea of how cities in India have grown and consequently how displacement has led to the reconstitution of ethnic or religious groups as objectified entities devoid of geographical or cultural context and logic. The space of the city is that of a damaged psyche, seething with multitudinous discontents, the broken threads of which weave the fabric of our everyday lives. It requires mutual understanding, caution, and compassion to communicate across these wounds. It is necessary to be continuously alert to the possibility of conflict being created or used as a smokescreen to obscure the relentless siphoning of our resources and the destruction of our natural environment by those in power at any given point in time, regardless of political affiliations. In the broadest of terms, this would be the underlying context to the politics of urban spaces. With reference to my fieldwork during and post-2002, we are again looking at a community which is migrant, a religious minority, and poor, factors which send flashing green signals to potential expansionists. We are talking of Naroda Patia village in Ahmedabad, the site of one of the worst mass murders during the carnage in Gujarat. In Naroda, the population is predominantly Muslim, consisting of laborers from Karnataka and Maharashtra. Around 200 of them were massacred on the 28th of February 2002 by a mob of almost 5,000. In the following year, the vibrant Gujarat Summit proposes, again within quotes, 24 projects worth more than 1,000 crore to be developed in this part of the city and along the Ahmedabad-Vadodara Expressway. Projects include hospitals, clubs, educational institutions, NRI, residential colonies, a business park, and a 120-room hotel. What we had to begin with, however, was ground zero. The destruction of homes, the extermination of lives, and a community that was in no position to speak for itself. Therefore, there were protest marches, rallies, and demonstrations by concerned groups who wanted posters that could be used for these events. So we worked around the constitutional rights in order to keep it fairly simple. Mostly, that is. But were unable to do justice to their full potential because the situation remained volatile for many months. The workshops actually began in 2002. By then, the community had relocated from the Shah Alam refugee camp to Faisal Park in Vatwa on the outskirts of Ahmedabad. They had taken a small house on rent, and we worked on the terrace, open terrace above, while the women worked on their sewing machines below. Faisal Park itself was actually, they were not relocated by the government, but they were relocated by the Islami Relief Committee, and it was an illegal settlement which lacked basic amenities such as water and electricity. We began with a very basic set of pedagogical exercises to do with drawing and color, to address issues of literacy, because the majority of them were illiterate, the group that we were working with. There were visits to the city, to places of interest, and to educational institutions. This is in the Sept campus at the Hussein Gufa. And this was with a view to re-establish the kind of links that were broken during the riots and to provide access to educational spaces which might not otherwise have been possible for the girls. This is the Madhubani workshop at the Kanoria Arts Center, conducted by Shatrughan Thakur, a student from MSU Baroda. And the Batik workshop, again at the Kanoria Center for the Arts, conducted by Praveena Mahicha, who is an expert in the use of vegetable dyes. So there was a kind of like a drawing in of resources from the city, as well as a movement towards the city in an effort to re-establish these links. By March, however, it was too hot to work on the open terrace, and therefore we built a shelter with the help of Sarosh Anklasarya, a good friend of mine and an architect, who designed the structure, and Binu and his helper from the Gandhi Ashram in Birchi, who actually put it up within the space of 10 days. We started working with fabric as a medium which could address issues of livelihood as well as cultural expression. But it was also a kind of a focal point of the entire project that it should enhance social and political awareness, as well as the possibility of articulating it and to facilitate such articulation from within the community. So these are the May Day rally posters which the girls made. Their mothers took them out on procession, and it remained with the community for many years. And so you have a community whose presence is negated by the city, which sort of reclaims a political presence within it. But demolitions continue in the, with the aim of projecting Ahmedabad as a megacity. Friends of mine were helping the inhabitants of Mahakali Basti to write up a petition which would halt the demolitions. They succeeded for a short while, but Mahakali no longer exists. But this book does, and it contains a piece of text by Shahrukh Alam, a lawyer and legal activist who was associated with Action Aid, who was central to the resistance. There were other books which recorded the process in other ways. And Shahrukh did a module with the girls, which encouraged them to examine the city from perspectives of gender, economic inequalities, gender inequalities, and to articulate them again. And these were extended into these pen and ink drawings, which look at their settlement during the floods of 2005. And again, talking about the lack of drainage and sewage. These were done at the Kanoria Arts Center. There was a video filming workshop conducted by a student from the Australian National University, Canberra, who was visiting me at the time. And of course, one is looking at the possibility of video as something that can document significant events within the community. So these were edited into 6 short films at a Koj residency, and one of them was shown at the Experimenter Festival. We were invited to workshops. The girls showed their work, spoke about it, and by then had gained the kind of confidence that they needed to apply for a public project which was funded by the Drishti Media Collective. These are narrative scrolls and form the backdrop to a play that they had created through conversations amongst themselves, and these are excerpts from the script of the play. This is Tahira enacting the play. And the play was actually taken out in the neighboring mohallas as a performative scroll. The mothers were not very happy about their daughters performing in public. So there was a kind of a limit to the scope of this particular project, but it was also taken out on procession to the municipality, because again, the play was talking about issues of water and education. And towards the end of the project, the girls were actually in a position to kind of represent, to make representations of their own experiences. And these are 4 paintings from the Shah Alam relief camp, their experiences in the camp. They were there for something like 6 to 8 months. And this talks about the banning of the film Parzania by the state government. This is by Tahira, and this is by Taslim. And motifs from the drawings and the paintings were then made into wood blocks. This was many years later by a student from MSU Baroda again. And then printed on fabric so that traces of the experiences of the community permeate domestic spaces in the city and remain within the ambit of everyday lives. So, and then comes the process of archiving, compiling, and showing the work, which happened in several venues. This is at the Hati Singh Center on Sept campus, and it was for a peace festival. That is Shatrughan. Yes. Okay. And then, in the meantime, painting continued. And as far as I'm concerned, for me, it's very much like writing a book. It takes about 4 or 5 years for a body of work to come together. And this particular body of work, Beyond Pain and Afterlife, is directly to do with the project. And it represents, through its progression, a kind of stepping aside and allowing another kind of self to take center stage. This is Shah Jahan, one of the girls that I worked with, and she was very badly injured during the carnage. I was also looking at categories of traditional oil painting, like the landscape, the interior, and the still life, with a view to creating a kind of an interrogative space within painting in which other kinds of projects could unfold. Okay. I would like to conclude with just a brief kind of, despite varying degrees of emphasis, all art is public in the broadest sense, and subjectivity is the prism that throws light on a world view which is in continuous formation. The studio embodies this position. It is at the threshold to a world whose dimensions are informed by the senses through which we perceive and interact with what is outside of us. An active use of the streams of language that radiate from the space give rise to different modes of engagement in quality and quantity, and as a far more complex way of envisioning the continuities of our shared space. Within the limitations of each aspect of the space, there is room for an active intersubjectivity in relationship to those who we work with or address. There are qualitative differences, but space is always public if we are conscious of the communicative potential of our work. For example, in pedagogy, through one of the courses that I teach, we are looking at cartographies of space through the study of local histories and ecologies to resituate them within an expanded framework which allows subjective interpretations and interventions. A few meters away from our department is a cluster of date palms, which are around 300 to 400 years old, in and around the grove are an old well, a small shrine, and a dargah. From studies undertaken by our Department of Environmental Sciences, it has been established that armies and travelers along this route, from as far away as Afghanistan or as close as Delhi, stopped for the abundant water and game available in the area. The dates that they carried with them created several such clusters, of which this is the largest. There had been plans to clear the area for more construction, but these had been abandoned due to certain mishaps that accompanied the attempt. Interestingly, it turns out that this is a sacred grove, and though it falls within the legal boundaries of the university, it has been mapped and secured in a different way altogether by the local community. Apart from the two shrines, there is a mythical snake, an Ichadhari Nag, who protects it. This is the work of Murlidhar Chandora, who is here probably in the audience. Given that sciences such as archaeology, cartography, and anthropology gained currency during colonial expansion and were heavily invested in creating territories and studying communities for reasons other than artistic or academic interest, we are discussing, among other things, countermapping, protest, and participatory mapping, which actually work against erasures. Ideally, Each context is a unique mold, which in interventions of any kind casts methods and outcomes in a manner specific to its construction. As earlier mentioned, the rapid changes brought about by indiscriminate industrialization exacerbate conflicting ideological positions to the extent of creating an ecology which supports and actively encourages violent confrontation. Generic responses objectify dissent to the extent of participating in the prevailing schizophrenia. The specificities of context are various and challenge our capacities in ways which would intimately impact what we perceive or confront on the ground, surrounded by the struggles of everyday life and everyday people brought closer through seeing, feeling, listening, and working together. Thank you.
So I will just quickly shuffle through a couple of my works. In fact, well, technically speaking, my work starts in Delhi at around 99, 2000. But I will go to 2000. The sound is there? Well, the situation was like this. In 2010, nearly 120 young boys were fell down by the Indian security forces in Kashmir, and there was a huge protest at Jantar Mantar. Now, the one group was there who was defending the armed forces there, that they were doing something against India there, and the other group was doing simultaneously a protest against the killing. So when I went there, I joined the protesters from Kashmir who were protesting against the stone, because the killings happened in Kashmir about a earlier killing, and they were all stone pelters. That no one was there who was holding a gun. So I did one thing within the protest which was happening in that area. I don't know, there's no sound, I think. Yeah. No problem, man. I think there's no sound. Well, what I was doing is basically to enter into the solidarity with the protesters who were stone pelters, or who were using this kind of a gesture to cover their face with a handkerchief and pose. And so I picked up one poster from the crowd which was having a text, "I protest," and I posed it as a protester. It was made it into a ball and posed it as a stone pelter. So that was one entry into the outside. So what happened is immediately after that, let me just go. So then there was a very huge Azadi seminar conducted, where it was 10 people were slapped with sedition charges. It was at the LTG gallery. There in the auditorium itself, I repeated the same performance. So I stood up on the dais and just held the same gesture, and people instantly posed. You can see people instantly stood up and made a gesture of a stone pelter. So this again, I was just trying to this inside and outside thing, where something was happening inside and outside. But this has come from this has come from the streets. You can see the gesture is a photograph from the net, and where the stone pelter is on the street and covering his face. So now of course the discussion will come up that who is the real and what is the simulation here, and that is why I'm interested in here. So what I did is here that then we created nearly 500 posters of a similar thing. You can see it's a large image. So it was an I protest image. We made 500 posters for Srinagar, and this was basically trying to enter into this gesture of covering your face with a handkerchief and on the tree to make it a larger understanding of what is protest. So it was an attempt to connect with the environmental issues also. And this protest sign, this I protest thing, then when the College of Art protest was going, I introduced this I protest little fabric, and I protest. So this one guy from the College of Art who was part of the FTI protest in Mandi House. So starting from this I protest, going into the College of Art and FTI, then going into some more and more deeper areas, and then finally into the yes, there was one more video where we gave whistles to the students there, and they were just making, entering with some more and more tools of protest to understand how it can be enhanced, how the tools of performance or the protest can be understood in a very comprehensive manner. And then finally this. So it was another, because going back to the Kashmir thing, it was this Zubin Mehta was invited by the government there to perform at the Shalimar Garden, and again is that there was a public parallel event called Haqiqat-e-Kashmir, and there I made an entry with another performance which was about, well, the sound is not there, the video is also not working. So the sound, I spoke about the music versus the sound, how the people are basically working with the sound as something, as a political tool against the state's reliability on making something musical and something as a state apparatus. There was this this performance here when I am going into the public, and what happens there in this public space. How I am. This was just basically a sound performance where basically I went into the public and I spoke about how to even the utter word Azadi. So the public was basically participating in this whole crowd, and how it was. Was making very quite loudly into the crowd, and it was quite a very intense situation. The army was there, and then quite a political moment in Kashmir that time. But going with this, going again back into this performance thing, I created one more with this at Sahma Jurin recently. I created one more parallel. Because Bharat Ratna is one of the most civilian awards we know, given to the most known people in the country, who are offered by the establishments. But I created one more parallel award called Hindustan Ratna. So the first one, it's not opening, I think. Anyway, I created a complete replica of the Bharat Ratna award. The same size and the same material, only the Bharat Ratna was replaced with the Hindustan Ratna, and I gave it first one to the Tista, and the second one I in Kolkata I gave it to this is the one I gave it in the Kolkata to Rohit Vemula posthumously, and while reading his suicide letter there. So that was how this was just how to understand what the state is doing, and lift it into our own understanding of art. Then my I don't know whether the image is open actually. Then my performance at the riverside, this I had to amputate to see. This it was an early, it's a 2002 performance when I amputated this finger piece to have some dialogue with the dead river. And then after some years, and I created one more image I had to amputate to see, to create one more reflection from the body and the act. So from public to public domain to the private is something happening. So one more, I mean just looking at the Vivan's work also, but I was reading a book, Perfect Crime, by John Baudelaire, who in his book is somehow saying that earlier there was something coming in the way of nothing. The earlier he gives another very interesting quote that it is the soul which is the trap for the body. So now it is opening. But now we have the quote was that he's saying that earlier it was something which was coming in the way of nothing. Now it is the reverse. Now it is the nothing which is coming over to something. That's what this collapsing nature. So out of that, I created one more connection in the city. So he used in this Perfect Crime. He's talking about that as a participatory into the entire life force on the city, where we are complicit in each and every. It's not like the gadfly, which is Socratean gadflies, a swarm of gadflies, which artists are, of course, and provoking the state every now and then. But at other level, we are there is somehow you can say that one horse is already embedded in that gadfly. That is the desire to have some little share in the power. So in that sense, we are everywhere, wherever the thing is happening. It's not that the them and us kind of thing. So in the Perfect Crime, he's saying that in the Perfect Crime, you cannot actually put a finger that look, this is the criminal, because we're always somehow in a hyperbolic way, we're always there. So as a button in a typical James Bond thing, that whenever the criminal leaves the scene, he drops a button somewhere in the corner. So I took a button and just pasted it at interesting points of the city to mark my presence at different points. So if I this is Kashmiri Gate ruins near this ISBT. So if I go to show somebody that this is where my work is there, the button is there. So the monument becomes the incidental. So wherever I am, whether it is Himayu Tomb or a metro station or some unusual location, wherever I have been, I put my button. And then there were some people who participate in their own way. But to enter into the city in my own way at one level and then going into the JNU thing. Well, the JNU thing on the 9th of Feb, when I went there, the atmosphere was quite charged. I was invited by Khalid to do a performance. But going earlier performance also, I found that when you are part of that political project, but the moment you enter in your own way, it actually unsettles them also. So I introduced it again, whistles with the College of Art also, it's also here. But I found that it actually unsettles them also. That they don't want to change the given set of tools and sloganing and banner making and all that. So my 9th of Feb performance, which luckily didn't come in the video, otherwise it was a very difficult moment. But the performance somehow went in such a way, because I went there and I introduced whistles again in the crowd, and then we dispersed. So I'm again at the admin block also, after a couple of days when the nationalism lecture started happening, I again went there and read the Kanhaiya suicide letter and introduced the whistles in the crowd, and students instantly kind of celebrate the new way of protesting. So those areas are very very much fascinating, because the moment you think of entering into the protest zone or the political issues, they become very intense or sometimes change something. So whether the Kashmir is there or this JNU thing is there, the idea of making something out of your performance art or idea body or idea of politics can create some new understanding for both of us. So for example, the Azadi word, if you say that I have been in Indian Social Forum, when I introduced the Azadi alphabet into the crowd there, with the hanging wooden structure about the Afzal thing, that if we go by that notion of Azadi, even the Azadi word is not Kashmiri, but now the debate is that the Kanhaiya has appropriated the Azadi from the Kashmir politics. So there are two sections, quite a divide there. No, he should not have done. Now he has again gone the patriotic thing. And so the Kashmir is again left out, that we want to know that Azadi was basically about us, not about Kanhaiya. And even but then Kejriwal also used Azadi, Bijli Billon Se Bhi Azadi. The Azadi word is actually everywhere. Now it doesn't remain Kashmiri, but still the Kashmir issue is there. which somehow allows us at every point of time to come back into the intense zones where the issues are unresolved, are confusing, which actually, outwits the artist himself or herself at some point of time. So you are going at it with the notion of gadfly, but how you will be consumed in the process, you also cannot plan too tightly, because the issues are quite larger, and you are attracted to it because as Job Bondler is saying that things are actually quite illusory most of times. When things have been quite, there is too much of information, and the meaning is shrinking day by day. So the information is there large, and then meaning is shrinking, and what the artist should do, and instead of, once the understanding is there that the soul is the trap of body, not the other way around, because in the religiosity we talk about the shrines and all that thing, that as if the soul is the most interesting part, and the body is kind of in the hierarchy system, the soul is more superior and the body is lesser. But in my understanding, I think the body is actually trapped by the soul. That's why the entire Bharat Mata Ki Jai and all the soul of the India and all that is trapping the body of entire country. So how to go back in the issue while knowing that there's too much of rat trick and too much of noise is there, and how to restore the idea of who we are, whether the Kashmir issue is there or whether the countrywide issues or protest and all that there. So there's a huge body of work which I can keep on showing about protest and about but I was just trying to connect to Kashmir issue, because also tomorrow we have this full afternoon at 6 p.m. I really wish and that everybody comes tomorrow at 6 to have a open-ended discussion about Srinagar Biennale. Why there is a need to talk about art, and yet what to do with the political part of it, because the political is everyone is basically holding to his or own port. But this is my political, but within the Kashmir also there are very numerous voices of violence and positions and all that. But what we are going to do, and because the JNU issue has really ripped up most of the left, even that we talk about what is radical left and what is the patriotic position, what to do with the Kashmir. So the situation is quite challenging for the artist. How much the courage is there to restore the idea of material, who we are basically, not to go by the catchy things of what is spiritual in all the thing. There's comfortable level connecting Sufism of Kashmir with the Sufism of the rest of the country. That's quite an interesting area, but the demands are increasing, and the demands are increasing to restore the idea of material, and the body is actually too large than what I'm personally saying, that even if I have been engaging with the Kashmir issue for last many years, but you will always see there's a deficit, and how much I've been able to do, very little. Whether I have done amputation at the riverside, but the river is dead. Being part of the dead, it was my idea of having some connection with the river, but the river finally is the dead, and then that there are too many dead things around us. So definitely this kind of a profound silence also there. Sometimes we may do nothing, but then this absence of work also makes something out of the public art. Actually kind of forecloses the idea of that there has to be something visible in the outer space to touch it and to feel it. Big monumental works, but sometimes it just looks like just small hidden button somewhere in the corner, and just to guide me to that, yes, I am part of that larger crime which the world is committing, and so I'm not something out of it. So there is this paradoxical situation for me now and then, but I have been enjoying all the time while even doing a JNU thing, which was very risky. Even when I was doing this, I will show you just this concluding image of this in Calcutta scene. It was a very I hope this opens. This it was 26th of Jan, I think 3 years back. There's a Calcutta performance. So it was in the public space. So I was holding the radio set in my hand, and the moment the Prime Minister of India was unfurling the national flag at the India gate. So I was having the running commentary on the radio set while I was wearing all these things, this cow intestine and the garbage and all that. So just by chance that I was not caught by the police, because the moment I closed, the police arrived. But I'm saying that this going closer to this, if you see that process of, I have the images open, but they are becoming too large. This was how I went into the street on 26. I was waiting for the time because the radio set was on. I was waiting the moment exactly the flag will go up. So I will pull this. So the technical way, I had this rod, and then this garment, this perforated garment there, and you can see how I was lifting with the thread. So it just went like this. You can see the garment, as if the flag, it just goes up. So definitely it was very at the edge. I could have been charged with 3 things at least: the nudity in the public space, and hurting the religious sentiments, and unfurling black flag on 26th of Jan. So this very, very coming the close. But yet I'm saying that this artistic interest, how far it can go. Maybe the arrest would have made more meaning out of it, because the moment the state comes into your work and just produces, the way the Kanhaiya thing happened. Sometimes the art is made by the person who is on opposition to you. Sometimes it is good, sometimes it can burn you also. But the public art, in my case, is sometimes very risky, but it can produce some meaning. It cannot, not necessary. Nothing is so given. But coming back to tomorrow's evening, I will just finish off. When we have discussion on this Srinagar Biennale thing, just because it's huge team up and the huge balancing of the inclusiveness between different players of state and other artists, and because everybody is not thinking like me, so the act of balancing also is an act of art. So tomorrow we're thinking of politics, but there will be some forces who will say no, we don't want to do any politics, and this doing politics and not doing politics is also a way of looking at how we can do something. But this tomorrow, if you come there, maybe have a better discussion on it. Thank you very much.
Okay, let me just start the discussion. I think what is very interesting about the first 2 presentations, the Vivan and Tushar. I think in Vivan, what was so interesting was it is like an archaeology. It's like it's like a Bildungsroman, a journey of life, of your artistic life, and also a kind of archaeology of the way you were dealing with all the works you did in this collaborative space. Not everything you did was there. It was certain specific forms that came up in the process, right? And in Tushar's work, you also raised this notion of publicness in both your cases. So what I thought would be very interesting is, and this comes up in comparison to both Vasudha and Inder's project, is this idea of the public performance and the public site is faced at a very crucial juncture today. And in Vasudha's case, this came out very clearly to me, because here is a moment of catastrophe, you can call. And the whole notion of the public, and the terrace image was very interesting to me, because he's been evacuated. Because 2002 is very interesting because it intimates our present in a way where the sites of danger and the sites of the public are crisscrossing all the time, right? And I was thinking of the 2000 images that Tushar showed from the Bombay performances and the Bombay works. I think today we are in a scenario where the idea of the notion of an artist having a public intervention is now seriously in question. And Inder's case is quite classic, because he's always is in this permanent site of danger. He never knows when he can be picked up, right? So the question I'm posing to you, this is the first question, is how do we revisit this notion of the public today? the artists and the public art form, and does 2002 frame it? Do we look for new edges? Do we look, as Inder always tries to do, enter this very charged political space and try and add more questions to it, which reopen the question of the political? I think it's a very interesting, because the JNU thing is very interesting, because and it's not just JNU, there's so many other events that are happening every day in the country. And so how would you revisit? And I want to start with Vivan, because there's 30, more than 30, 50 years of your life here. And we've entered a new zone now. We've completely, and then I'd like to go down, if you can respond to this.
In one sense, I feel I'm an outsider in this group. By that I mean, the very first image that I presented, May 68, and there's a context which literally takes you out of the studio, and you're on the street every other day, and the other artists wondered, am I painting or am I, protesting? So this relationship between that and the image I presented, for me, the word that comes to a certain historical moment, a moment of crisis, there's an image, and an image of poignancy, like I did in Memorial, that work of the victim killed in the streets of Bombay, is the word distanciation. And my need for an aspect of abstraction, or to find a form, that's what I've been saying all along, that could be one thing that engages me. So I'm not engaged in the moment to moment of being present, as a social action, as an NGO, as political activist in the scene, but as something that affects me, and the transformation comes very much through the form and the image. And so therefore I'm, in one sense, an outsider to public art.
Tushar, you
well, I don't know. I mean, the way Inder kind of jumps into things, he's a performer, and I am. I don't know. I kind of. For me, I mean, when one was in Bombay, actually, one had a lot of networks with a lot of groups and communities and people, and one would just, it was something that it was. Yeah, it was almost like you would be meeting them often, you would be meeting them over, there would be some meetings, and you would keep going for these meetings, and things would just kind of emerge out of these kind of things. They were not like absolutely spontaneous kind of things.
Yes.
And it was more out of a long-standing kind of relationship that one had with a lot of people and groups and stuff like that. And I don't know, after coming to Delhi, one has not been able to really connect or, plug into the city somehow. Also, we are living at the other end, so one does not kind of get these kind of opportunities somehow, I think. But, yeah.
Comment was
I just again the inside-outside thing, because I think yesterday Sai Baba was given the bail, and both Binayak Sen and this Professor Sai Baba, I performed with this cage on my head, and my head was blackened, and I was writing with a little twig in my mouth with the charcoal at the end. I am Dr. Binayak Sen. And at Jantar Mantar, I used the same cage when the protest was organized in support of Sai Baba. But what I'm saying is that just luckily that after a few days, both Binayak Sen and Sai Baba were released, but I don't take the credit to myself. But what I'm thinking is that this has given me opportunity to understand the space and the material. In the Binayak Sen case, when I was performing, it was quite a thing to work at many levels. I was doing a drawing. I was thinking, going back into the basics of drawing. What is the what is the art and what is the art of drawing actually. So the charcoal and the easel and the paint, so it was there. So the second layer definitely was about art. So first layer, it was explicit layer, was about political thing. So the second thing was when also I tore some pages of Constitution of India during that this Benaxan thing. But when I did at the Jantar Mantar with Sai Baba, the same cage. Now what was interesting, when the cage was on me, I again locked and then threw the key in the audience. But when I was speaking through the cage with some black cloth on my head, so the head was invisible because giving an impression of the person who was in the prison, the listener also becomes attentive. I was saying the same things which I would have said otherwise also. So all I'm saying is that the moment you enter with some new fresh tool or form or material, anything, it can be, artists are basically trained for that. But I think these are very pregnant and very potent areas where we should go and create some sort of intimacy with these forces, even if nothing happens in the end, but they just sharpen us. The idea of restoration of the material, who we are basically. So these are the areas. What are those areas? Not that if we go by the areas of that spirituality, then there's a big full stop over there. It is this conflict, this idea of where it is disappearing constantly, like and how to restore it. But you see, ironically, we have a huge army at the Siachen Glacier for no purpose of it. But yet the glaciers are melting elsewhere. So the entire environmental crisis at one level, and the way how state is working with these glaciers, in a metaphoric way also, and how we have to react with this idea of glacier. Whether something has to melt inside us also to make it more sharper not for public consumption also, but for us also in the first place.
Well, I am also a bit of an interloper in this forum because most of my work is situated outside of the public as one understands it. But what I would like to say is that, in terms of understanding a situation, I think it's possible to have a sort of like an overview, but when I actually work, I am very, very intensely engaged with every individual in the group, and I think that is very important as far as I'm concerned, because you are kind of working at a micro level and very, very close to the ground. But I think the intensity of the engagement seems to have some kind of an exponential potential, which is a surprise to kind of see it unfold before you. And as far as 2002 was concerned, I also sort of saw it in terms of a kind of collapsing ecology in many ways. I mean, an ecology for survival, an ecology for making art. It was just not there anymore, and it was just impossible to continue to work in a studio space when the rest of the house is burning, in a sense. So, I mean, that is the kind of metaphor that I always have about that particular situation, and in a way, one was compelled to work. But having done that, one has changed, fundamentally, and I realize that there has to always be some kind of like a public engagement. But that is, of course, dependent on one's personal, situation at any given point in time. I think another area that I'm really interested in is something that I didn't mention during my talk, but then it's also one is also looking for the possibilities of a public engagement to enter the language of, the medium that you work with, whether it is painting, sculpture, whatever it might be, and the area of visual representation, if you would like to call it that, as kind of living vocabularies which enrich the existing, what do you call it? And also forms of language which kind of emerge from these intense public engagements. So I think it's as important to sort of go out. It is equally important to kind of take something and be able to craft it into kind of an extension of language, and the possibilities of communication, the possibilities of peace also kind of, are created.
Yes, of course.
Can I just
Yes,
add
yes,
a little
please.
postscript?
Of course.
Because Ravi started with the word kind of archive. And well, when one is saying the public seems to be something that's outside, that's in movement. But I'm interested to propose, and in fact I would have shown it, that a public institution, an institution which the public visits, a piece of architecture, and here I'm quoting, say, the Victoria Memorial. Now the Victoria Memorial in Calcutta, now its visitorship, it's not a visitor that comes to a museum to contemplate works. It is a public site, and to then intervene or position one's artwork in that site, and then in relationship to the word archive, the engagement with history, with something of the past, which then you bring forward to the present, and that in the sense of it being an installation, finally its destruction or its death is a kind of performance to say that there was a position placed in this public space, you had visitors, you have an argument, then its translation into a film or a book, perpetuates that questioning, so that it's a very different taking forward than an activist person being like Inder does. So I think that that's the sort of space that my work engages with, and then to take certain historical moments to re-bring them back is my kind of statement about performance of historical past to a new present, and comment on it.
This question to Inder. Inder, it's what I saw. I see your work. I saw today. I was a bit scared of the responsibility you have taken, and it seems you are alone. Have you ever tried to perform with two?
Of course.
People?
Two
in the same level, two. And the second question could be a very esoteric question, because you have lots of things, as you use the word body and soul. And so I'm not going there actually, but the point I want to make about this statement, because this oneness could have been a possibility of heroism. I'm sure you know this, because the issue is so big, and most of the thing I saw you alone everywhere. So my question to you, how you solve your area of danger of heroism?
So, number one is, I think I have been always working with, I don't think art happens alone, because somebody is always there. In performance art, definitely it doesn't happen alone. It doesn't happen in private rooms. So you're somebody, maybe the image doesn't show that, the process of it, but the moment you arrive there are so many things keep on happening there right now. But even if in 99 with Sahmat, I think the first one of interesting this food performance was a three artist project. So we did this cooked rice and distributed to people, for nearly 500 people on the street that day. Maybe Vivan remember that. But the aloneness, I think, comes from a very different, I can have two answers, quick answers for that. No, I will just tell you.
But the danger of heroism, you understand?
No, I'm telling you this, because the one is that you're constantly projecting yourself, but in performance art, as Deleuze would say, the body never ceases to be a body. That's wherever you go, the body is there. So whatever it happens, even if so, this soul and body basically is kind of a conflict which we are trying to get away from it. So it doesn't actually, it actually pushes us to the idea of what's happening at the molecular level. That's why I like arts. That's why I'm constantly going this, what the others are doing, because I like the people when they go in the details, whether Vivan is doing or whether anybody is drawings and details or small things. So even the looking at is engaging with the details produced by others is really enriching, and doesn't make me as only a spectator, because to grasp it, you actually own it also in fragments. It's not that only the author is there and the audience somewhere else. So the grasp of the details of the others' works also makes me an artist. Then I go somewhere. So the aloneness is never a question in that sense that I'm alone. Maybe the image shows it there, but I am constantly, uploading myself with the works of others, whether it's reading material or listening material or going into the conflict zones. The point is that you actually go into the area which is pregnant. It's like an animal. You go into the area where there is something to eat. So my demands, my idea of who I am is not is satiated by something which is pregnant. You go there, whether you do much. I have the fun with a lot of. They also don't like me too much. It's not that I am the most wanted person. I have a huge fan following in Kashmir. But that's not that then everybody loves me there, because I do sometimes nude performance, and you can imagine Kashmir, and I talk about LGBT, and I gave last time a slogan that because of Article 377, this LGBTQ and KM. So I was.
I just want to say something from where this question came.
Yeah.
The question came, some students are sitting here, and your approach, it's a very unique approach, what you have done for the last 10, 15 years. So I was just imagining that, can it be a pedagogic structure for the students to put into the educational system a kind of artwork you do? The question comes here that if you start 20 years back and you are, I don't know, 40 class or 50 class, whatever, there must be some kind of maturity in the performance level, which is particularly your body, speed of walk, speed of talk, speed of whatever. So that entire thing, can it be more an educational structure where in art college one can actually learn?
It is already unpursued in India. It is not seen. Even in Lahore College has a performance art department. The point is that India has really been, maybe behind Nepal even, right, in many areas. The thing is that you mature. There was a couple of years back, I think the last year, this lecture by Isle Wiseman is an architect from London. So he gave a lecture on forensic architecture. It was kind of opening a new window for me. At the Sarai also, we had this, discussions on what is architecture. So that has actually helped me to understand performance. What is space and what is architecture. How you actually are guided by the structures where you are floating every time. So the multiples, through which the body enters and just makes the understandings and the arts are everywhere. It's not only I have an opposition to color or painting. No, everything in the multiples we operate. So definitely the performance art is an additional tool in the understanding of art. It's not something exclusive. So no, it can be in theater, it can be not in theater, but then performance is art kind of a bridge also sometimes. It doesn't have its own special body of work as a genre, but definitely it is free to do. I can do tomorrow video, I can write, I can speak, I can be naked, I can be pasting some small buttons. So the flexibility and the freedom which I have given to myself without being dependent on the institutional support. So it has come from my own work, because I work somewhere from 10 to 5. So that way I have been enjoying my free time. I can't claim that I have set the reverse ablaze, but then I have been enjoying my free time much better without having any this tension of whether I am seen as an artist. So I see myself at the tail of the Indian art scene, not as somewhere into this main discussion. But I think that can help the students definitely to come up with their own projects, to feel free what they're doing with this free time, rather than entering into this whole syllabi what they have been trained for. So to discover new materials, to discover new thoughts, and even silence, poetry. There are millions of people who are writing poetry, they get nothing out of it. But yet people are, that's what actually fascinates us. So it is quite rich area. So we have only to see where the body can be tapped.
There's a question that comes up from Vasudha also, and what Mantroja said is about the personal within the public and the idea of witness. Because I'm pleasantly surprised to see that you're still when placing the bottom, because it becomes a very personal act within a public space, and there is being no kind of witness. A lot of your early I mean, we've been a long journey. A lot of other performances earlier where they have been hardly any witness, like you're amputating your finger, there's only camera as witness. I mean, that's the place where I'm interested in, actually, personally speaking. But it's nice to come and see that, just putting in the little thing of that button coming back again, of doing a personal act within a public domain, but not always having an invited audience or a ready audience to look at you. So that's, I mean,
one little detail. The internet becomes is a part of my work, because in the button case also, or in other case also, even the first clip which I showed was uploaded on the video, so which I am showing. So the internet doesn't become kind of a virtual thing, becomes part. The button project is basically visible through internet. So Facebook is there. I put a button there. I have an image and upload it at the. So people, yeah.
Live audience.
Definitely.
Invited audience also, of acts with live audience.
Yeah, sure. It can be.
I just want to add a comment there. See, this is a lecture by Boris Groys that I attended, I think 3 years ago, and he made this very interesting point, which is actually not his own point. He was taking from a series of works, where he said the public form of art has been fundamentally transformed by what he called the algorithmic turn, which is this point you raised about liveness. The notion of liveness has fundamentally been transformed by this. But by the current moment, where you have this personalized objects which are recording every moment of everyone's lives, and in art, Instagram, we know the role Instagram is playing in art today, right? And so we have to think a bit about that. That's the reason I started with this. We have a certain 40-50-year-old archive of public art in the city. I was just thinking, Inder, imagine if your performance had been part of the JNU video. So one of the most interesting things that art does to the political, I think, is to introduce new vocabularies that disturb established hierarchies of the political, right? And there's no, the eviction notice that Tushar showed, there could be so many things. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, what happens to this public that we are all very. There's a set pattern of our engagement, collaboration, participation. I want to ask this question, and Inder, you've had a lot, so maybe others can come in and think about this. How would you, that's really the opening question I had. This permanent regime of publicity that we are, do we escape it? Do we rewrite the idea of collaboration? Do we script a new form of intervention?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm also interested in languages which speak in secrecy and in silence. And I see painting and drawing as something which is very much a part of that kind of language. So, and it also one realizes that these forms of language have very limited visibility at the current time, for obvious reasons. So, I think, it's also possible to situate different aspects of one's work in different sort of realms of visibility, and that is also a way of actually using the public space in order to say something that you think has value, or something which is of burning importance, for instance. I don't think we should shy away from a public presence. I think it is very important. But then the subtleties that are available within, the subtleties for exchange that are available within that space is what we should be looking at, It's good to keep quiet sometimes, it's good to have a secret sometimes, and it's good for that to be evident in your work, even if it doesn't actually reveal itself completely. So I think these are sort of nuances that one can incorporate, because, after all, work is something which spans an entire lifetime. You're living a life, you're not just making work in public. So what we actually choose to frame are just moments of, significant convergence, it's by the virtue of that convergence we are able to share it with the maximum number of people, So I think those are moments that we recognize and we put it out there because we are terribly concerned about the state of things, So that's the way I would see it. And not in terms of like kind of like hankering for, visibility, optimum visibility at all times, or, that's anything.
I was, Ravi, you've always sort of spoken about things outside that fast-forward mainstream gray zone. Suddenly now I'm hearing a word like Instagram. I barely heard it. Somebody told me what it is. So then it's like that unless you're out there, unless you're with the latest technology, and that's where you are going to transform things. But I think there is a whole, it's not mine, but a whole position of slowness, of being out of step, of being out of time, and you then reposition yourself to look, from the past to how you bring that forward, or to see this present from another lens, from another. So I think that there is a terror in the way that speed is taking over everything, and you thought Facebook was doing it. Now there's Instagram, or something else will come. And of course, the young move in that, and millions of the audience are there. I remember talking to FTI students, they called me, and they said we got such hope when we were being attacked that we had sort of reached a very high figure on Facebook, that there were, hundreds and thousands of people all over India who were with us. So that certainly is a very important now public space. But one just sort of saying that we cannot only say that that's the space we have to move and make our statements, and in the sense of crossing over to other mediums, to mediums that are performative, and that they then represent something of the past outside just, say, if you are visual artists. That aspect interests me. So there's performance, but not for the moment and for immediate consumption.
Yeah, there's just one other point that, we don't realize when we're being a little shy of exposing what we make. I think we don't realize the extent to which the image or visuality is used to create perfectly dystopic situations. Like you take the Rath Yatras, or you take the holograms that were projected in 26 cities of Modi making a speech. These are very powerful experiences, and if we don't counter them with images of equal potency, then we really are in deep trouble. So, this image has a public life, whether the artist wants to have a public life or not. So, and if you are engaged with the image, somehow you are dragged into that public space,
One quick comment and then a question, if I may. One quick comment to Inder. Considering how the Aadhaar card is now being centralized by the government, and an entire website is being made where literally anybody can visit and see the number of government employees that have reported at work and the kind of jobs that they're performing, I find it absolutely amazing that you're able to subvert your government contract, the banking job that you have been performing, and be present in context of art. And I think that's a daily performance, that's a daily subversion that you're able to do, and that is part of performance that should enter this discourse as well. Having made that comment, the question that I wanted to ask was that there seems to be a stunning similarity in the way the artists, the practitioners today have positioned their practice within the public. Nupur in the morning hinted at the ameliorative aspect of public art. In some senses, it's edifying as well, where communities, where the artists work with communities and sort of bring out the voices and also negotiate on their behalf. I was wondering, since Ravi, you belong to architecture and you talk a lot about urbanisms and public art, I'm reminded of Richard Serra's installation called Tilted Arc in 1981, which was removed by the public 7 years later because it disrupted their daily flow. And the artists maintained the position that the work of art, even after being removed, will only be able to be reconstructed if it was put back at that very site. I was wondering if in your experiences of working in public spaces, have there been incidents where the public, the community, the site at which you're working rejects, protests against the work that you propose? And how would you have processed that?
Does anyone want to respond?
What I did in the Victoria Memorial, there was a register, and a lot of people said that how could I, in this august building, bring railway tracks and jute bags, and that it had destroyed the aesthetics of it. But nobody came and vandalized it. Maybe the public in Bengal or Calcutta was a little more civilized. But they did make a criticism that this destroyed what, for them, coming to the Victoria Memorial was.
Well, just another anecdote about my nude image in the public, my leaning on this dead root, it was much earlier, so now it's everywhere in the net and all that. So one day my wife saw it on the net. So who said that, what is this? I said, but no, somebody has photoshopped it, it's not me, it's somebody's head. So she looked and she said, but then feet are yours, pair to tumhare hi hai. So definitely it is I definitely think that if my colleagues will come to know that what kind of work is going on, it will be trouble. But I try to, they open up Facebook, I tell them I'm not there, so something like that. But it definitely, you are navigating this contradiction. I don't want to be caught, that's a very simple thing, During this, amnesty protest against the hanging, when I was taken by the police, and once you are taken by the police, you can understand it. It becomes different, just what to do, you are wondering. So this, you never would like to be caught, but it can happen. So but sometimes it enriched your experience. I was in Kashmir for 10 days in Central Jail during my college time. But that, I'm so happy because I was there, because you understand how much of innocence is there trapped, and how people are there, and how to be in the prisoner's uniform and go with one blanket, one cup and mug, and just come in the row and take all that things. So this is another experience which sometimes helps you, but one would technically never go into it, because it can sometimes burn you. But if you come out alive, you can speak about that. People have been coming out alive, and that's what it is, because we want to listen stories from the torture cells of Kashmir, and there are terrible things. What for example Afzal has been going through, as a project put into this thing, and electrocute, just electric shocks to his genitals and all that. So people go through terrible things, and his last interview you can see in the net is so shocking, and so you can see that what state has been doing to people. And there is one army officer, he has definitely gone through cannibalism, and people, when his father goes there and he tells, yeah, your son was very tasty, they have been eating people there also. So the amount of torture and this absolute brutality, what the army has been doing, and you listen it afterwards, because when you go into those spaces and you listen to that, and you're shocked, and then I don't know how to talk about art after that. But definitely we have no choice but to go into it with some material, and just have some also good time, and just provide a new expression to the protest, rather than simply depending on the slogans and the banner and the stone pelting. So that's our job, but the situation is always very dense.
Yes.
I just want to also sort of answer Amitish's question, because in my case, of course, there was no protest as such. But when we started work, there was a lot of cynicism, like, what are these people doing? What is this all about? So I think, it was necessary to make a kind of a connection between issues of, say, livelihood and the project, and also of course, like the therapeutic value of the project, and the fact that it sort of like, it was at a time when the girls had dropped out of school and they needed to be put back into a kind of a routine again so that they could sort of resume their normal lives. So there were these kind of issues. And as far as the performative project was concerned, the thing is that, of course, the mothers didn't want them to perform in public, and then we had to find a way around it. So I think it's a question of, being sensitive to what they, want, and the aims of your own, intervention. And one other thing was, ultimately, I think, if one were to actually think about it, at the end of the project, there was a time when most of the girls actually got married, and some of them not very happily. And that sort of like completely put an end to their voices. Especially one, Tahira, who was like very vocal, and she was taking part in the kind of legal workshops that were being organized. She was traveling. But, this is what happened. So, if you were to look at it in terms of, the community not cooperating with something, I would see this as a sort of like an example in the case of my project. But that is something that, then you realize victim and perpetrator, these are kind of fluid categories. And public and artists, those are also fluid categories. It's sort of several crossovers, and you just have to work your way around it.
Two more questions, and you. Yes.
I was just thinking that when we use the term Yeah, so I was just thinking that when we use the term public, what are we really referring to, and what in terms of particularity, what do we anchor on to? Like, how do I decide what kind of public am I addressing? Like in the case of internet, also to Ravi Sundaram. In the case of internet, what happens to the context and to the particularity of the subject?
Asking me? I think it's for the artist to answer.
Those who are working with the internet would be in a better position to answer.
No, I'm just.
I will just shortly. Shortly, I will tell you, because this binary of virtual real has collapsed since it was always collapsing in the process. So the internet is always public, and it's not virtual only, because we do so many things through internet. So in our own personal capacities, we understand the medium. Whether Facebook, I don't go to Twitter because it is too large. So you have to be there for hours to understand it. So I go very rarely at the Twitter. But Facebook is there, so I have been uploading my still images, whatever do, then come comments, and you have a ready-made audience. And some of my, people have been uploading on the YouTube. So YouTube is another way of being public, without having if you do a small film for 10 minutes or 5 minutes, I think it should be ideally uploaded on the YouTubes and just share with the friends, rather than inviting people from distance to have a, but yes, the physical presence to have a conversation and the lively moments before that and after that definitely makes a, screening worthwhile. But otherwise, I think the YouTube is an ideal, or the internet in many senses is very public domain, and we should use it. Why not?
No, I think my question also was more about, I'm not saying that of course I'm not saying that it's wrong to upload or use the internet. It's the thing that we do more frequently than even we breathe. But I'm just trying to understand what happens to the intensity with which a very particular context has to be addressed. Okay. My question is more in.
I think that is something which is difficult to control, basically. There at that point you sort of just let go.
No, and also.
Yeah, I can. See, I think for me, I'll speak for myself. public is an imaginary addressee. Even all cities are like this. A city is an imaginary environment. And all critical interventions, it could be political, it could be artistic, address and intervene and speculate in this imaginary environment. Now, the internet is no different. It's an infrastructure, and the contemporary infrastructure of capitalism privileges permanent publicity, circulation, agglomeration. That's how the infrastructure of the internet works. Value is generated through circulation. That's the first question I asked them. Because value has now been transformed today, because capitalism is producing value through constant circulation. The million hits you get, the million likes you get, that's how value is produced, advertising is produced. Anyone in the industry knows this. Any basic person see, people working on art today are addressing this regime of publicity. The question I would open up is, okay, there the form of intervention is open, all forms of intervention. For example, if you see one of Marina Abramovich's early videos, the ones she did, and the highly spectacular encounter in MoMA, which I think 1 million people would have seen now. All right, how would you place these two interventions? This is a question we have to ask ourselves as people who are interested in art, the idea of the public. There's no easy answer to this. And this is the question that's really open today. And in the case of him, that's the question. That's why I asked him, what would have happened if his performance had been part of that video? It's a question that I also ask myself. And there I think the great potential for art and artists today in this really disturbing landscape of the political is now, it's a series of possibilities, I think, as far as I see it.
Internet is also being used to share documentation or images of works that have been created outside but not for the internet. And now we're in a place where we're creating works for the internet using tools that are available, whether it be Instagram or otherwise. So it's not a photograph that then goes on Instagram, it's a photograph created for the Instagram. So we've already moved beyond circulation to actually production on the net for the net users.
Sorry, just to add to the comment, I mean,
Vishali, a quick...
For instance, the doctored videos of Kanhaiya, what kind of public was it addressing to? And it definitely knew the kind of public it was addressing. I mean, also the thing that we did outside the Mantralaya in Bombay, that Tushar showed an image of. Actually, it was after a series of protests which were happening at Azad Maidan, and we were going there every day to sort of support the Adivasis who had come from Nandurbar and all those places. What had happened was that the press was losing interest. People were protesting, people were on a hunger fast, and it was almost the 16th or 17th day, and the CM was refusing to meet the protesters or the representatives of the NBA. And that was when this thing was devised by him. And it is a Z security zone, which is not obvious from either the images which were showed or today he is in a really non-communicative mood. So, I mean, it was about 10 of us who reached there, and we had not planned it. But because it's a Z security zone, there were at least about 6 police, those vans right there. And then suddenly, people from the Andolan, student protesters, all of them just descended there, and the whole traffic stopped for 2 minutes. And 2 minutes in a Z security zone is a huge thing. We were all rounded up, we were taken in police cars, and we were idiots because we didn't know what forms of protests are at that time. We just surrendered to the police. It was only when we got into the cars, we were told by the, sort of activists that now at the next signal, let's push them all. So then the women were kept in front. I mean, these were things that one learned. And because there was just a male guard there, we pushed him. The guys behind started screaming that, you're touching women, without a woman policeman. And we went back to the site and we started protesting again. So the fact that we could be in that Z security zone for a short time of about 5 minutes was a big deal. We were all rounded up and we were taken to I think Kulaba Police Chowki.
There were 800 of us in the Kulaba police chowki, and we were actually in a position to talk with the policemen and with other people about how the raising of the dam height, because at that time it was not yet 91 feet, I'm talking about the Sardar Sarovar, was actually bad. And it was like, by the time we were, a whole lot of activist lawyers and pro bono protesters had kind of come in, and we were all released. But by then, there were pamphlets which were given to the policemen. So it was like, there was not a public that we even envisioned.
Imaginary.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
So, there are a whole lot of things.
The internet actually opens up all these dangers
Absolutely.
and potentials. And
Absolutely.
Dangers also. So.
But so does a public action. Because you don't know what kind of public, when you actually put yourself into that position.
I think we are running late. 40.
Quickly ask everyone to actually respond on this, because we're talking about publics in terms of like the active public, what Inder is constantly engaging with. But works like Vasudha's roles, they're actually working with publics in a, the speeds are very different. You're not talking about the Instagram, internet kind of speed in which it's working. This is like a slow process where the public is sort of, the public that she's engaging with are the women, and it's about memory, and it's about remembering certain instances in history, or many artists who work with documentation as a mode of public art. I'd actually like you to respond on how you think of that kind of speed determining one's practice in public art. Yeah.
Well, I think there's something that I should also mention, that it was not just there were several resource people and Himmat, the collective that I was engaged with. So everybody participated in this process. So you don't really get a sense of, this is actually to address something that Ravi said, that there is not total control over what is happening. So a lot of things evolve organically in such a situation. And I think that sort of divests you of that, kind of like a problematic sense of authorship. So as far as this particular project was concerned, there was actually very little question of authorship in the beginning. It was only towards the end, when one had a certain output that, one felt one could put it together and, present it to people who might be interested in the kind of things that one was talking about. So that is one aspect of it. And could you repeat your question again? I think I kind of like digressed.
In terms of the different modes of artists working, right?
Yeah.
To think of the public only as the active public in which, probably Inder works with more often, which would be as a protest, in a protest meet or something. Whereas there are a whole lot of, because this I'm asking because we're working on an archival project where we're looking at language and how you look at performances and, public art. And one of the problems that you have is to also see how do you engage with duration? Like, how do you look at artists who are looking at documentation and using that as in a public art project, where it's not live, there's nothing to Instagram about, but it's this constant sort of work that needs to go into it, and then it's presented in different public forums post that. It could be different kind of spaces, but then where the public isn't that visible.
It isn't. And actually, for a period of something like 3 to 4 years, I had completely gone underground. And I really was not in touch with the usual forums for, art that existed in the city. And this was a strange, kind of very disorienting feeling, as a matter of fact. And I think it was also like, again, it was a kind of like a giving up of authorship as well to the community. And that is something that takes time, because there has to be some amount of facilitation which needs to happen, for that to take place. How does that work? I think it's quite magical, as a matter of fact, because you just find that things begin to fall into place, and there is a sort of like a kind of a grand not a choreography, not in that controlling sense of the word, but something, it just begins to start happening, and I think it's very exciting to see that unfold, and it sort of points the way to what you should be doing next. So one is also working purely with intuition and instinct in that sense. So that is a totally satisfying process in itself, and the publicity bit doesn't matter so much then, to put it quite simply.
Just a question. I know you're running out of time, but it's a question to Ravi, and because you won't be there in the next session, so Ravi, you several times used the word imaginary public. Now, conceptually, I understand, and it is in fact a concept, the imaginary public, or public as an imaginary construct. But there is also a tactility to the public. There are also contextual publics, and many of the artists here, several of them, not all, work with actual, what the question here was, that there is a context and particularity and literally a body relationship in public space. And I just want to, and I want you to speak a little about that, but I just want to give an instance. Very dear friend yesterday said, I said, have you been going to any of the JNU teach-ins? And he's a JNU student. And he said, no, but I've been seeing them on the YouTube. Now, I think this is, to me, not acceptable, because the actual atmosphere, the ambiance, 3,000 students sitting there and listening absolutely intently to an 1-hour talk with a very poor mic and almost no light as the light fades. That's a completely different phenomenological and human experience. So I don't think that every time the word public is used, you need to affix imaginary to it.
It's an old philosophical question going back. I spent a long time at it. I think part of my point here is we don't know where this is going. We don't know. I think we have to revisit some of the. I don't disagree with you. I've been to many of, all of us who were in all the JNU demonstrations and protests know the importance of it. But I also understand the solidarity in places like Berkeley, all of which is an image. It's a simple, all the different towns and small towns of India, people just send an image. I understand that too. So I think we have to revisit this thing of location and embedded. I really think it's not either or. I'm with Inder on this. It's not either or. We have to revisit this. And the question of the public, which is I think quite central. Publics and publicity are central to contemporary digital capitalism. We have to revisit it and revisit what art performance means in this public space. And that's why it's a very apt panel today in India. It really makes sense. It doesn't negate any of the work done in smaller spaces, doesn't negate silence. And I really appreciate the fact that, Vasudha, you brought this out. The right not to speak at certain moments, and the right, choosing your time, weighing and crafting intervention. And orchestrating different moments of duration and intervention. I think these are all very interesting political potentials in a moment that privileges constant circulation, right? And I think these are very interesting takeaways, I think, from this moment. And Vivan, and I'm certainly not on Facebook or Instagram, even though I'm interested in this moment of publicity. So thank you all.
Just some small, share some little bit, because we're winding up, about the public and the documentation. So many years back, I remember when I was traveling in a crowded bus. So I saw a young man who was harassing a woman. And I just turned around and his penis was very erect. And the woman was very frustrated and blushing and all that. Now, I saw that young man was quite robust and I couldn't pick up the fight with him. So what I did is I slowly grabbed his penis. And the moment I grabbed his penis, and he blushed and simply disappeared. So the question is that the public and your intervention and the documentation is actually at other level playing differently. But this is also one way to talk about performance art. Thank you.
So can I just, first of all, Sehmat has come, and Ram Rahman's wonderful catalogue of 25 years of Sehmat, plus the other projects, Art on the Move, are here if you want to see them. They are there. Manti is there. Anyway, you can लोग पीछे आ जाएंगे देख लेंगे अब सब उठ रहे हैं. Thank you.
1 hour late, right? Thank you everyone for a good discussion. Thank you all of you for wonderful intervention.